This was a mess. Hi folks, I'm Gino the Painting Acolyte, and I made a mistake. Okay, several mistakes, but let's go in order. Mistake the first. A while ago, I was browsing my favorite addiction-enabling subreddit, the Miniswap subreddit. It's a place where people buy and sell and trade various miniature hobby-related things. Usually miniatures themselves, but paints and other things like that. Well, someone posted a listing that caught my attention. It was, to put it quite simply, a fuckload of terrain for a very reasonable price. I've lately been playing a fair bit of Warcry, the Age of Sigmar skirmish game. A friend of mine moved back into town, and I've gotten him into it, and we've been playing a bunch.
What's that? Oh, hey, didn't see you there.
It's fun, and it requires a fair bit of terrain. I had some, but I wanted more. Now this is one of those situations where it was more than I needed, and it was more money than I wanted to spend, but in total it was all stuff that I wanted, and it was like all combined a very good price, even if it was more money than I wanted to spend in that instance, so I bought all of it. So sometime later, a giant box of lots of sprues showed up to my apartment. Mistake the second. When I have a lot of stuff going on, miniature project related wise, I kind of get super into the mindset that it needs to all get done together as fast as possible, as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, and I can't just like do pieces of it at once. I need to get it all done at once. You know, when it comes to like single models or smaller scale projects or stuff like that, I'm perfectly fine taking my time and, you know, taking things slow and all that, but for some reason when I have a lot of stuff in front of me, I get consumed by this urge to do it all at once. I wanted to do that with this terrain for a couple of reasons. I wanted to get it done so I could, you know, play with it, so I could play the game and have painted terrain and all that. And I also wanted it done so that it would stop occupying this space in my mind as a big project that I hadn't finished yet that I needed to get done. So I spent a long time building terrain. And when it was all built, it was time to start painting. Mistake the third. I wanted everything painted as quickly as possible. I wanted it built as quickly as possible, and then I wanted it painted as quickly as possible, so that it could all be done. I primed everything with some spray cans. I usually hate rattle can primer and varnish and just using rattle cans in general, but there was no way in hell I was gonna fit all of this stuff into my airbrush booth and airbrush prime it all. I mean, I could, but it'd take forever, and as the aforementioned get everything done as quickly as possible, airbrush primer was not the way to go. Some of them I hit with a black prime and then did a like white prime zenithal with the spray can above it, and then others I hit with this like reddish brown prime. I bought the can because the color on the can was more like reddish brown, like that nice like terracotta color, but then it came out pretty much just like pure bog standard red, which I wasn't super pleased with, but I didn't want to stop doing it, so I went ahead and primed everything red anyway. With big projects like all of this, it's usually very smart to lean heavily on, you know, cheap, fast, efficient tricks. Dry brushing is a really big one, especially when it comes to terrain. You can get a lot done very quickly, very easily, very cheaply by dry brushing terrain. I hit the red ones with a very heavy ivory dry brush. I wanted to get some nice like dark brown to light brown stuff, and, you know, as I mentioned, the red was less brown than I wanted, but, you know, still some brown in there. I eventually also used my airbrush on the red ones and airbrushed in some like dark brown shadows on some pieces, just because I was really not happy with just the red base coat and the ivory dry brush. With the white and black pieces, I wanted a bit more of a distinct and obvious, like, stone gray mid-tone. I tried one thing, it didn't work. I tried another thing, it went okay, and I decided that I was just gonna do that for everything rather than spend more time on it. With terrain, I mainly use craft paint because it's a lot easier, it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot more plentiful than miniature dedicated paints. Because if I was going to use my really nice miniature paints, I'd go through like hundreds of dollars in small bottles when, you can get a lot of craft paints for like 20 bucks and it's fine. And with terrain, fine is usually fine. The downside though is that they can be harder to work with. Enter the messy and mediocre paint jobs on most of the base coats of all this stuff. I got a set of metallic craft paints because I didn't have any before and I didn't want to use my fancy and expensive miniature metallic paints, and they were okay. The results varied. Some had nice coverage and color, some had nice color but poor coverage, some had nice coverage but poor color, a few were just bad all around. The silver steelish one was really nice and had good coverage and painted well, and I actually will probably use on even some miniatures, maybe with dry brushing, because it was a pretty good result. The gold had a really nice color that I wanted to use, but its coverage was really bad and would take like 8 layers to show up. I tried mixing in lots of things, applying it in different ways, doing different things with it, and it was okay, but then I eventually decided that I was going to airbrush the gold and kind of keep the gold to a bit of a minimum so I didn't have to worry about it too much. So the airbrush job for the gold is kind of messy and it was bad, but I was like, oh, I'll cover up the overspray with the gray anyway and it'll be fine. If you ever wondered if you can use craft paints in the airbrush, the answer is kinda. Sort of. Maybe. It'll work with a little bit of extra effort, but it won't be great. And it might vary from airbrush to airbrush, but it ended up fine, and it, had coverage and got done. While my miniatures paint jobs range from, grimy and rusty and gross to grimdark or, pristine and shiny and clean and nice, my terrain I tend to want to paint pretty grimy and gross and rusty and stuff because it's easier to do. It's easier to make something gross with a little bit of effort than it is to make something nice. And it's kind of just ties all of my terrain together when it's all similarly gross. The best thing about all this paint is the rust effects that I did. I'm actually pretty proud of how a lot of the rust turned out. I accomplished that by I got a few different orange brownishes colors in some cups. I mixed in some glue and some baking soda and then just kind of sponged it on at random in different spots on the metal. Just really going to town on it, mixing it as I was painting and just kind of slapping it all over. And the baking soda and glue leaves a kind of rusty texture, and the color is nice, and the rust I'm actually pretty proud of and pleased with. It looks pretty good. It's probably a little over-applied in a lot of places, but I'd rather overdo it than underdo it. Mistake the fourth. With terrain like this, a lot of the heavy lifting in the paint job comes from the wash stage. Now, using dedicated miniature washes for all of this would require about 1 billion bottles and about $1 gazillion, and I didn't want to do all of that. Now, I think ideally, oil washes on all this stuff would be the best, efficiency-wise and color-wise and all that stuff, but I figured that if I was going to paint all of this stuff at once, which, as I'd mentioned, that was the plan, using oil washes, I'd probably kill the remaining brain cells that I have, which isn't a lot, and I need those. So, instead, I used homemade acrylic washes. Now, I'd had a few, jars of homemade acrylic washes that I had made, 2 years ago that were, just collecting dust in my room, and I wanted to use those, and I don't remember what the recipe for those that I used was all those years ago, but it sucks, and they're bad. I think it used dish soap instead of, Flow Aid to make it flow better, and this is dumb and a bad idea. Because if you try and mix it up or anything like that, it gets super bubbly, and you get really weird staining and, very weird pooling on your miniatures, and it looks really not good. I got, a third of the terrain done with these homemade washes that I'd made a while ago until I was like, fuck this, I'm done, this is bad, it looks awful, I hate using it like this, I'm doing something else. So I put it down, I dumped those washes in the sink, I was done. Done, mad, angry, not using that. I sat at my computer defeated for a bit and then eventually decided, you know what, whatever, I'm already in for a penny, in for a pound, whatever. I'll just try again. Let's get this done tonight. I've got nothing else going on and I want it done. I went back to the desk. I remade some washes. I kind of made it up as I was going. I mixed in a bunch of different things and tried a bunch of different things and was testing them on miniatures, and I would post the recipe, but to be honest, it was mostly just mixing a bunch of random stuff that I had, and I also forgot to keep track. But the results were a lot better and easier to control and looked much nicer than what I had done before. So I got back to it, washed everything, absolutely drenched these things in the homemade washes. Once the wash stage was done, I could really see how everything looked, and it was fine. Once I had the time, I used some spray can varnish to seal everything up and be done with everything. Now, I hate spray primer. I hate spray varnish out of a spray can. It is awful. It's super tricky to get consistent, both in finishes and in applications. It smells awful. It's just, I hate spray cans. They're awful. I was going to do a coat of gloss and then a coat of matte for protection and then finish in that order. The gloss can I had barely sprayed. I think it was mostly empty, so I don't really know how much of it actually got onto the terrain itself, but whatever, I threw that out when it was done. And then the matte can I had was like mostly empty when I used it, and I sprayed it, and its finish is a little glossier than I wanted. And then when I was done with that, I had a different can of matte varnish, and this one was much, much more matte, so now I've got kind of like different finishes, but whatever, it's done. So ultimately, we arrive at these pieces, a culmination of mistakes. Now, I want to assure you, this is not a video of advice. This is not a humble brag video about look at all my cool, sweet paint jobs and, look at all my stuff. This is not a showcase video of stuff that I'm proud of. This is a bit of a compilation of warnings and advice about what not to do. This terrain is done, and it is out of my mind, and it's, finished, and I'm done with it. But it is sloppily painted and not very good. Is it nicely painted? No. Is it passable? The jury's still out, but they're leaning towards no. It's very arguable, and it depends. There are some pieces that are pretty decently painted and I like the look of, but there's a lot of pieces that are just and there's a few that are just really bad and don't look good. It looks mediocre, it's washed very badly, there's a lot of weird stain marks on a lot of pieces, a lot of them aren't highlighted very well or at all, and a bunch of them are just visibly not good. But as a whole, it's consistent and it's done and it looks passable and it's definitely playable, which is ultimately what I'm going for. The lessons here are many. Don't buy a bunch of stuff just because you can and because it's a good deal. You're not saving any money by spending money just because you get a good deal, even if it's really tempting. And this is advice that I should follow as well. Don't do a bunch of stuff all at once just because you're stubborn and you want it done. It'll be a miserable experience and it won't be done to your satisfaction. Don't be stubborn and stick with things that don't work. If something's not working, try again in a different way. Don't just be like, well, it'll be fine, and, power through it. It's just gonna be bad, and you're not gonna be happy that you did that. Don't overload yourself and make projects stressful. This is a hobby that we do for fun. Don't have a big project that you're not working on that stresses you out that you're not working on, because, again, this is a hobby. It's supposed to be fun. You shouldn't look at things that you need to paint as oh, this is something that is stressing me that I'm not doing it, because there's so much of it. Take your time. Be careful. Have fun with it. Paint better if you want. Ultimately, this terrain is done, and I'm good enough with that. Some look okay, most are passable, and some are just bad. But it's all done and out of my mind. That's the best I can ask for. I hope you learn from my mistakes. I hope you take my advice. I hope this video taught you something or gave you some kind of idea or just reinforced the idea that don't do what I did. And most of all, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, subscribe, leave a comment, notification bell, you know, all that stuff. Thanks for watching and sticking around. I truly hope you enjoyed me ranting about terrain. I'm Gino the Painting Acolyte, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye. Now, where the fuck am I gonna put all this?